What's up? We're back with another round of UFC predictions, and this card is stacked with some killers, some prospects, serious Mitch matches, and I'm gonna break down every fight the way I feel like it will go. And this fight in particular, this fight card in particular, it has a lot of age differences. I've noticed when breaking all these fights down, there's like at least 7 to 10 to 12 year age differences in all of these fights. So I don't know if that was a theme for this fight card, if the matchmakers were trying to get rid of the old generation and bring in the new gen, but it's kind of what I noticed, especially with this main event as well. But let's get started. First fight on the card, we do have Melissa Martinez versus Fatima Kline. My pick is going to be Fatima Kline. She's coming in as a big favorite over Melissa Martinez, and I actually really like Melissa Martinez. Her striking is pretty good. If this was only a striking match, I feel it would be pretty competitive. Because the way Melissa looked in her last fight versus Alice Ardeline, I thought she looked pretty good. She was sticking and moving, and she was kind of picking her shots well. But when it comes to the physicality difference between these two ladies, Fatima Kline is going to tower over her. She's going to be the much stronger fighter. She's going to have a big height and strength advantage there. And I just think in the clinch, Fatima will be able to boss her around in there. And she'll get trips on her, and she'll just be much stronger than her everywhere the fight goes. And so both of these ladies have only one loss on their record coming into this fight. And the difference is Fatima lost to Jasmine Jazz Divisius, who's gonna be a future champion, and Melissa Martinez lost to Elise Reed, who's an aging veteran. So that in itself should kind of tell you who's gonna win this fight. But yeah, if you just look at Fatima, she just always looks so game when she's coming into fight. Like she's not coming to mess around. I mean, Melissa Martinez is as well, to be fair, but I don't think Melissa's will to win over here is going to be enough because physically there's going to be a huge advantage for Fatima, and skill wise, even if it's matched, which it probably isn't. Fatima probably has more skills than her all over, like well roundedness. Even if the skills become matched, just her physicality difference is going to give her a huge advantage here. And even skill wise, I still think Fatima is better than her, especially with the wrestling. So I just see Fatima overpowering her over here, and she'll probably give her first finish loss because Melissa lost by decision, but I think she could get finished in this fight. Fatima is just going to be the bigger, stronger, more dominant fighter, especially in the clinch. And she only lost to Jasmine, which isn't a bad loss. And Melissa, she's going to be a good striker in there, but she lost to Elise Reed. There's going to be a huge physicality uh, disadvantage here. So I'm picking Fatima Kline to win in either round one or two. Either round one or two. So next fight we have Mitch Ramirez versus Mike Davis. So here's the thing about this fight. I'm going to pick Mike Davis to win this fight. And if you've seen Mitch Ramirez's last fight, you can say like, okay, he looked super bad, and he did. He looked really bad in his last fight versus Thiago Moises, which was over a year ago, like a year and a couple months ago. That was the last time we seen him. He looked really bad against Thiago Moises, who isn't really the best fighter of all time. You know, he's not like a top contender, Thiago Moises. So you're getting bullied and picked apart from Thiago. That's not a good look. But not a lot of people know that he had taken that fight on 2 weeks' notice, and he had to cut 30 pounds or something like that in 2 weeks in order to make in order to get this fight, in order to make his UFC debut. And that really messed up with his performance because he had like really bad heart problems coming into the fight, and he had such a tough weight cut. I feel that really made his performance a lot worse than what it would have been. And that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of the reason why he got manhandled in that fight versus Thiago Moises, who's not like a real contender, right? So when he does win, though, when Mitch Ramirez does win, he hasn't had a win in the UFC. When he does win, it's versus very low level competition, and he's still looking to get that first win in the UFC. It's just like in the last fight, he just looked like a complete punching bag, and I feel like that's why the odds are so in favor of Mike Davis. But we haven't seen Mitch Ramirez in over a year, and I feel like we don't know what to expect coming into this fight. We don't know what he's been doing. Like, we don't know if he's been working on his game. He's gonna look complete. I think he's gonna look a lot better than the last time we saw him because he's not gonna have a huge weight cut in such a short amount of time. And we just don't know really what to expect from Mitch Ramirez coming into this fight. I think he'll be better prepared, but having Mike Davis as a UFC debut is not an easy task. Well, not UFC debut because he made his UFC debut, but trying to get your first win in the UFC over Mike Davis is not an easy task because Mike Davis has multiple wins in the UFC versus notable opposition. So this should be Mike Davis all day here. I feel he can really do whatever he wants with Mitch Ramirez. He'll probably strike better than him, take him down if he wants to. I feel he'll definitely have better durability, but yeah, this is gonna be really telling for Mike or for Mitch Ramirez because if he looks as bad as he did in the last fight, then he really is like not UFC level. But he has a chance to prove himself here, and it's just that Mike Davis, he doesn't have an easy style. He kind of just walks you down, and he's very calculated at the same time. So I see him styling over Mitch Ramirez here. And Mike Davis is a really tough dude. You know, he's not just gonna give up or whatever. But on the contender series for Mitch Ramirez, Mitch had to fight Carlos Pratas on the contender series. And in the first few seconds, maybe no, in the first few minutes, Mitch Ramirez took Carlos Pratas down, right? And he held him there for a good amount of that first round. But then Carlos Prates got into the zone. He didn't get taken down again, and he kind of just did what he always does to most opponents, which is pick them apart, land heavy shots. And Mitch Ramirez got tagged up in the second round. But in that first round versus Carlos Prates, he looked strong. He looked like he took him down and he held him there. So I'm not saying that Mike Davis is going to lose this fight. I just think a lot of people think he's gonna steamroll Mitch Ramirez just because of how bad he looked in his last fight, which not a lot of people know. He had to cut so much weight in such a short amount of time, and he was dealing with so many problems leading up to that fight. So I think it's gonna be a little bit more competitive, but I still think Mitch Ramirez is more skilled and he's going to have more ways to win, and I think he's just a tougher dude. So I'm taking Mitch. I'm taking Mike Davis because he's just more experienced. He's a sharp striker. He has good wrestling, and I like the way he walks you down with like the pressure he has. And I feel like that's gonna be an awful matchup when it comes to Mitch. And also another thing I want to say about this fight is like if you're like that desperate to get a fight where you're going to really cut 30 pounds, I can't really speak on it. This guy, he's trying to make his dreams come true. But I feel like if you really, because if you think like of people that are really good in the UFC, I feel like they wouldn't do that. Like they're not gonna put themselves in such a vulnerable position where they're cutting all that weight in such a short amount of time just to get a fight and have a really bad performance just to get into UFC. It's like if you believe in your skills that much, sooner or later you're gonna get the call for the UFC. But it's like, oh my god, this is my one chance to get a UFC fight. I have to do whatever it takes to do it. It's like you're kind of moving on their time. Whereas if you truly believed in your skills and you truly believe that you have what it takes to get into the UFC, you're not gonna put yourself in such a vulnerable position like Mitch Ramirez did, where you're cutting all that weight and you're gonna have a terrible, depleted performance. I feel like that's not a good sign. That's not what I want to see in someone who sees themselves as a future champion, you know? I just feel like that's such a red flag. But now that Mitch Ramirez is coming in with full health, he's not gonna have those weight problems, those health problems, cutting all that weight. This is very telling for him, and we're gonna be able to see what he's really about against a really good fighter in Mike Davis. I still think skill for skill, Mike Davis is gonna have the edge here. So I'm picking him to win this fight. I think he's too skilled, and I think he's too calculated. But I don't think he's gonna steamroll this guy. A lot of people think he's gonna steamroll him only because of how bad he looked in his last performance. Moving on, I'm picking Mike Davis to win. I'm picking Mike Davis to win. Next fight on the card, we have Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Valter Walker. I really wanted to pick Valter Walker to win this fight, but it's not gonna happen. Kennedy Nzechukwu, excuse me, he should win this fight. I think he will win this fight. As much as uh, the heavy favorites are in this card, I'm surprised that Kennedy isn't like a bigger favorite. I think it's because Valter is coming in on a two-fight win streak. He's a submission specialist, got back-to-back heel hooks. But that's not how this fight is gonna go. Because the stand-up game between these two, it's not gonna be close at all. I feel Kennedy has such a superior arsenal over Valter in the striking, and Valter is gonna be looking to drag him down and get a heel hook, get a submission, or just kind of at least get some control time. But I don't think Valter will be able to land that takedown on Kennedy because he Valter needs to get this fight on the ground. But I don't think he's gonna have an easy time doing that because Kennedy, he's really big, he's really athletic, and he has good takedown defense. And I just see Kennedy keeping this fight on the feet. He's gonna keep this fight standing. He's gonna outpoint him on the feet. He'll probably win a decision because Valter is tough. But I wouldn't be surprised if Kennedy gets him out of there with like a TKO, kind of like the ref stepping in and being like, all right, no more. So yeah, I just think Kennedy, he has such a clear striking advantage here, and he's gonna be long, athletic, And I really like his takedown defense. You know, he doesn't accept being taken down. He doesn't accept being bullied. He doesn't accept being, controlled or manhandled. He's always like putting himself in good positions to land the shots he needs to land. And I think Kennedy will win this fight pretty convincingly. Because for all we've seen out of Valter Walker, he really likes getting the fight to the ground. He's a submission threat, but he needs to get the submission. I feel he needs the submission here in order to win, and that's gonna be really hard to do versus Kennedy, who's just gonna keep it standing and just win the exchanges on the feet. That's kind of how I see this fight playing out. So yeah, I'm taking Kennedy. Next fight on the card, we do have Junior Tafa versus George Tuko. I'm gonna pick Junior Tafa to win this fight. I'm picking Junior Tafa. He's a former kickboxer. He's making his first move down to light heavyweight, coming in from the heavyweight division for this fight. And in the heavyweight division, he had 2 wins and 3 losses. And welcoming him to the light heavyweight division is George Tukkos, who's 0-2 in the UFC. His UFC career has been in the light heavyweight division, and he's 0-2. And how I feel about Junior Tafa moving down to light heavyweight is that I actually really like it for him. I think it's a good move for Junior Tafa. Because what that tells me is that when he's cutting those extra pounds, it shows me that he's being more disciplined. And he tells me he'll probably be more in shape. He'll probably be more faster, more athletic, more aerodynamic in there. I feel like he's going to just feel like a better version of himself when he's down here. And he's coming up against Tuko Tokos. So this is probably like the easiest fight he could ask for if he's moving down to light heavyweight. This is a gift for him. He should definitely beat George Tokos here. I'm just not a fan at all over anything Tukos has to offer skill wise in the octagon. I will say that he's a very tough fighter, but that's not something you want to be known for. You don't want to be known for taking punishment. You don't want to be known for how tough your durability is over your skills, you know? I just think he's just at such a low level at the UFC, and he'll take punishment from fighters and he'll keep coming forward, but when it comes to the striking technique, it's just not where it needs to be in order to compete in the UFC. I feel his only chance of winning this fight would be, I don't want to say take him down because I don't even think he'll be able to take down Junior Tafa. I think he will just need to press him up against the fence and get control time out of it. Get control time, and even if that does happen, I see Tafa just maneuvering and landing the more devastating shots. And over the course of the 3 rounds of this fight, I just see Tafa landing those shots, landing the heavier shots. And if he does get pressed up against the cage, while Tukos is trying to take him down, Tukos isn't gonna have much success doing that. And if he does get him down, I feel that by the time he closes that distance, Junior Tafa would have landed those shots by the time that George Tukos gets close to him. And I feel like Junior Tafa will land enough damaging shots before the distance is covered for him to win the rounds. You know, he'll have more damage. So even if he does get taken down, I feel like Junior will have done enough damage to win him the rounds. Just look at their stances between the two. Junior Tafa's like, I'm out here, I'm doing it, and I feel George. He's kind of just like in a timid. He's kind of like a timid stance, like he's unsure of himself. He's gonna hesitate a lot in there. And the thing about Tuko Tokos is that he doesn't seem like the type of guy that really wants to win. And he's 0-2 in the UFC right now. So if he loses this one, he's probably gonna get cut from the UFC, or he's probably one fight away from getting cut in the UFC, win or lose his next fight. Because he just doesn't seem like the type of guy to care about doing what he has to do in order to get that win. Like right now in this fight, his back is up against the wall, and he's 0-2, and I can see him being 0-3 and getting cut after this. He just doesn't seem motivated to want to get that win. Even though his back is against the wall, I feel like he still isn't. He doesn't seem like, okay, I need to win this. He's kind of just like, oh, if I get cut, I get cut. It's whatever. And not to mention that he's 35 years old right now, while Junior Tafa is 28 years old. So there's a age difference in this fight, a 7-year age difference in this fight. I think Tafa will just be moving better in there. He'll be more athletic. So give me Tafa to win the first 2 rounds, landing good shots. But I don't think he's going to knock out Tukkos, because Tukkos can take a good shot. He can take some good punishment. But I think he's going to be bruised up from Junior Tafa's shots. And Tuko might win the last round just based off of resting on a somewhat gassed out Tafa. Tafa not doing enough to win the third round because he knows he won the first two. So yeah, I think the move down to light heavyweight is a good move for Junior. I think it's going to make him more faster, more athletic, and he's just an overall dangerous striker. Coming up against someone who's very durable but not very skilled. 0-2 in the UFC, sloppy striking, and he's just super low level. He doesn't seem motivated to want to win. And yeah, I see Junior Tafa just winning this fight. The first 2 rounds based off of damage. It'll probably go to a decision. Next fight on the card, we have Morgan Charriere versus Nate Landwehr. My pick for this fight is Nate the Train Landwehr. I'm going Nate over here. Let me explain why. So, like I said in the beginning of this video, this fight card is filled with fights that have a huge age difference between the fighters. We have Nate Landwehr, who's 37, and Morgan Charriere. Let's just call him Morgan because I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's going to be 29. So that's an 8-year age difference. But the thing about Nate is that he has really good cardio and he doesn't fight like he's aging. He has a lot of experience under his name, and he doesn't fight slow. He has really good cardio. The thing about Morgan is that when we've seen him win in the UFC, it's first round knockouts. And he beats the guys that he's supposed to beat. But when it comes to these experienced guys or these high level guys, kind of like Nathaniel Wood or Chipin Marskill, he goes to war with them. He can't get them out of there, and then he comes up short. But the thing about Morgan is that he likes to come forward and he likes to throw down. And like I said, he beats the guys you would think that he's supposed to beat. But when you think it's going to be a competitive fight, he comes up short in them. And I don't know if Nate is an easy fight. I don't know if he's just supposed to beat Nate just because he's a lot younger than him and he has more potential. Because Nate doesn't fight like an older guy. Morgan, he has good power and he has good striking. And you can say that Nate Landwehr is aging, and it seems that Nate isn't as good as Morgan. But I really like Nate Landwehr's cardio. So if he can last the distance and survive the first round, I think he can win this fight. I see Morgan having more skill, and he has much more potential to grow as a fighter than Nate, who we've seen everything he has to offer, which is just a good overall fighter and not a rising contender. But I'm leaning late Landwehr just because I don't see him getting knocked out early. And that usually gives Morgan Charriere problems as the fight goes on. So I think as the fight goes on, Nate can use his cardio to keep up the pace and out volume Morgan here. So I see the vet pulling this one off. You can say Nate is 37. He's a vet. He's an aging vet, but I feel he's just a cardio machine and he doesn't go away easy. Morgan, he does have skills, but he fades in wars and he struggles with highly skilled vets of the game. So I just think Nate will be able to outpace him late, and I can see the vet pulling this one off. So unless he just eats one big shot in the beginning of the fight and then goes to sleep, then Morgan will have his way here. But I just don't think that's going to happen to Nate. I think he's going to weather the storm and win the fight. Wins the later rounds of this fight. So I'm going to pick Nate. Next fight on the card we have Vitor Petroni versus Austen Lane. So this is another fight with a huge age difference. We have Austen Lane, who's 37, and Vitor Petroni, who's 27 right now. So we have Vitor Petroni, who's coming off of two back-to-back losses to Anthony Smith, who caught him in a guillotine as Petroni was taking him down. And we have Dustin Jacoby, who knocked out Vitor Petroni in a fight that Vitor was winning, and then you know Dustin Jacoby caught him late, and that shot won him the fight. So you can say if he kept it standing with Anthony Smith, he probably would have beat him if he didn't go for that takedown and he got caught, right? And if he didn't get caught late in that round, late in the third round versus Justin Jacoby, he also would have won that fight, right? So these are just these little mistakes that he's making that are costing him the fights. So in my opinion, I think Vitor has lost in all areas of his weaknesses, and he will decide not to shoot that takedown versus a lengthy submission artist like Anthony Smith, who has good guillotines, and he won't leave his neck in a vulnerable position. And when it comes to the third round, I think he'll understand not to play it. He'll understand not. He'll understand to play it more safe in a fight that he's winning. So I'm picking Vitor Petroni to win this fight because he has the skills to be a real contender here. He has potential to be a real contender, and he has good striking. He has good wrestling because he's fighting Austen Lane, right? So the thing about Austen Lane is that the way he came into the UFC was from the Contender Series, and the guy he fought on the Contender Series is someone who looked like you picked him up at a bar at 4 a.m. in the middle of Kansas, right? And then you told him, yo, you got to fight in the Contender Series. And that's exactly what he looked like, and that's exactly the way he fought. He fought like someone who had never fought a day in his life. That's kind of like what it looked like. He was able to take Austen Lane down in the fight. He got reversed, and he pretty much just gave up. He let Austen Lane knock him out from top position. So then Austen gets into the UFC. And what has Austen done in the UFC? He's lost 3 times, all by knockout. And the only win he has is over someone who has zero takedown defense, where Austen Lane was able to just take him down on repeat, right? So Austen Lane was pretty much just spamming takedowns, and that's how he ended up winning that fight. So I think Vitor won't be able to be taken down time and time again. I think he's very athletic, and he's athletic enough to keep it standing. And even if he does go to the ground, I think he has the tools and the skills to get back up and pick him apart on the feet, land the heavier shots. But the thing you have to land the heavier shots, right? And we know Austen Lane, he's very chinny. He has 6 losses on his record. All 6 of his losses are come by getting knocked out. It's a crazy stat. 6 losses, 6 knockouts. All losses from knockouts. Like, it's crazy to see that. But so we can see Vitor kind of putting his lights out. But you have to keep in mind that Austen Lane did win his last fight versus Rebellis de Spain, the Cuban prospect. Not his last fight. The time where he did win, spamming all those takedowns, he won that fight as a huge underdog. Everyone thought he was going to get knocked out, kind of like how he always does, kind of like how we think he's going to get knocked out in this fight. But the difference here is that I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Austen has the chance to win as a big underdog again because Vitor, he doesn't need to rely on that big one shot knockout in order to win this fight. I think skill wise, Vitor is going to be better than him everywhere, especially in the striking. And I think he has what you need in order to keep this fight standing. So, yeah, like I said, this is another fight on the card where there's just a massive age difference, 27 versus 37, and that's a big difference in a fight, especially when skill wise, Vitor is going to be much better and more athletic than him. So Vitor should win here. I think Vitor gets the knockout here. I think Austen Lane's chin is really done. 6 losses, all by knockout. That's a crazy stat. So Vitor, he fights like a fighter, and Austen Lane fights like it's his first day in sparring. I just don't like what I see when I see Austen Lane striking. So I'm picking the more skilled striker. Vitor has solid wrestling as well. He's athletic, he's young, better skills. Coming up against Austen Lane, who's 37. 6 knockout losses. He's just kind of sloppy, and I feel he needs to get this fight on the ground. And I don't think he's going to be able to. So I think Vitor Petroni is going to get the knockout, and Lane's durability won't be able to hold up here. So I'm taking Vitor Petroni to win this fight. Next fight on the card, we have Lauren Murphy versus Eduarda Moura. I'm picking Eduarda Moura to win this fight. Look, again, another fight on the card where there's just an insane age gap between the fighters. We have Lauren Murphy, who's 41, and Eduarda Moura, who's 31. 10 years is a huge difference in fighting, especially when the other fighter is pushing 42. But the thing about Lauren Murphy is that she's really game. She comes to fight. She's tough. She's aggressive. But so is Eduarda Moura. And I see her having more aggression than Lauren Murphy. She's going to be able to push the pace. And with youth and athleticism on her side, I feel that's going to give her a big advantage here. And Eduarda Moura, her only loss in her career is to Denise Gomes, who's very high caliber, and she lost that fight by split decision. So competitive, you can say, right? So Lauren's just at a point where in her career where she's kind of just turned into a human punching bag. You know, she hesitates a lot on her shots. She's not going to be able to flow in there. She doesn't flow very well. And she gets hit pretty easily. Coming up against Eduarda Moura, that's a huge concern for Lauren, you know. So I can see Eduarda having a very dominant performance on her here. It'll probably just be like a flawless victory, you know. If all you have is aggression coming into this fight and you're aging against someone like Eduarda Moura who has a lot of potential to be at the top of the contend to be a top contender, I feel Eduarda can have a very flawless, dominant performance here because she's been looking really good, especially in her last fight. She looked really good against Veronica Hardy. So yeah, I don't think this is a good matchup at all for Lauren Murphy. You know, she's 41. She's gonna be super tough, but she's just slow and she's very hittable. Coming up against Eduarda, who's 10 years younger, 31, probably in her prime right now. She's aggressive, athletic, and she's dominant everywhere. So yeah, I actually think that Eduarda is gonna have a very dominant performance here. It's gonna be a very one-sided fight, you know. And Lauren Murphy, she's just way too hittable nowadays. Next fight on the card, we have Jake Matthews versus Chidi Njokuani. I'm picking Chidi Njokuani to win this fight. I think Chidi is he's just so locked in right now. You know, he's been looking good. He has a 3 fight win streak, and I don't think Jake Matthews is the guy to snap that win streak. You know, Chidi looked really good in his last fight, and it was an impressive victory over someone that a lot of people thought would be able to beat him. But Chidi, he's locked in, and he's super massive for the weight division. He's very dangerous, you know. I think there's another 6 or 7 year age difference in this fight, but Chidi doesn't fight like he's aging at all, right? He's very dangerous, very lengthy. He seems to be more in shape than Jake Matthews, in my opinion. And the thing about Jake Matthews is that he's super inconsistent. Sometimes he's on, sometimes he isn't. So I'm leaning with the consistency and momentum Chidi has right now, and of course his skills, right? But I just think right now he's put it all together, and he's really feeling himself right now. So I can see Chidi landing the heavier shots in there. I can see him being more durable in there. And I just think his length, it will be able to be a problem. I just think no matter where the fight goes, Chidi will be ready for it, and he has more ways to win this fight. And even if the skills become matched, it can start out as a competitive first round, kind of like a sparring match. Chidi is going to be much bigger in there. He's has that confidence coming into his last 3 fights that he knows what he's capable of. He's on a roll right now. He's just dangerous everywhere the fight goes. Whereas Jake, he's just very inconsistent. He doesn't know how to deal with these slick, long strikers. I'm going with Chidi. He just has a lot of momentum right now, and he has a lot more tools to win. And he's not fighting like an aged fighter. You know, he's seems to kind of put everything together right now, and I feel like he's just on a roll right now. He's really feeling himself, and he just seems so locked in. So I'm picking Chidi to win this fight. Next fight on the card, we have Chris Curtis versus Max Griffin. I feel good about Chris Curtis in this fight. I'm picking Chris Curtis to win. I feel he should definitely win this fight. You know, I see it being as a striking match, and I think striker versus striker, Chris is going to be the better striker. I don't see Max being as competitive, especially in the striking, but I feel Max will want to get this fight to the ground, and if he does decide to go for the takedowns, I don't think he's going to be successful getting the takedowns as well. You know, so I think both guys they will want to stand here, and I don't think Max Griffin has a style that can defeat the slick boxing of Chris Curtis because Chris has really nice slick boxing, and you can't you can't think that Max Griffin is going to outpoint him in a striking match, right? You know, I believe Max will be bigger here. He'll be the bigger fighter. Like Chris Curtis is usually the smaller fighter, but Max is actually making his debut for this division. Let me actually check. Yeah, it's a welterweight fight. So Chris is used to being the smaller fighter in there because he's always fighting at middleweight. This is his debut in welterweight, and he has potential to do a lot of damage in this division because he's not gonna be as small as he usually is compared to the rest of his opponents. And I feel that he's used to being the smaller guy, right? So even if he is smaller than Max Griffin, he's still going to be able to outskill him here. And I don't think the height difference is major. You know, Chris is probably going to be like 1 inch shorter than him, I believe. So he's used to the guys being bigger than him, but it's not going to be that big of a height difference or strength advantage for Max Griffin because Chris has dealt with that his whole career, and now he's slimming down, gonna be more in shape, more faster, more slick in his striking versus Max Griffin. So even if Max does have a physicality advantage, Chris is used to that, and he's dealt with heavier guys, and he's still putting on good performances. You know, Chris he only lost to really good guys up in the middleweight division versus Roman Kopylov and Brendan Allen in a very good war, a good fight between the two. So now he's moving down. He's not gonna have that big strength disadvantage or height disadvantage. Even if Max is bigger than him, Chris is probably well, he's definitely going to have more skill than him. I feel this should be a very easy win for Chris. You know, he's gonna move forward and kind of put that pressure, that boxing pressure, and kind of roll with the shots. And Chris, I just really like his boxing here. So I see Chris landing the better shots and just being more elusive in there. You know, Max Griffin, he does have power though, so he could sting Chris Curtis if he does land. But I just think Chris is too skilled with his boxing. You know, he only lost to really high level competition, and right now Max is out of his prime. You know, we haven't really seen anything from Max that's like, oh wow, this guy he can really make a run in this division. So I just think the slickness in boxing for Chris is going to be able to win him this fight. And even if Max does land on him, I just think Chris is very durable. You know, he's not the he doesn't quit and he doesn't react very heavily to getting hit when he does get landed on. Right, so boxing, just has elite boxing right now. He's a slick counter striker. He's very durable. Max, he does have power, but I just think he's too flat footed to beat someone like Chris, like to outpoint Chris. So I'm picking Chris to win this fight. I think it's going to stay standing, and I think he wins the striking battle in a very clean manner here. So I'm looking forward to this performance by Chris because I have high expectations for him. I think he's going to win. Next fight on the card, we do have the great Calvin Kattar versus Steve the Mean Machine Garcia. I think that's his nickname, the Mean Machine. I say the great Calvin Kattar because I feel like we've seen him fight for so long, and he's kind of like a legend in the sport right now. But I'm picking Steve Garcia to win this fight. You know, Steve Garcia, when he first got into the UFC, we really didn't know what to expect. You know, he lost a decision, I believe, and then he got knocked out. And ever since then, he's kind of just been on a 4, 5, maybe 6 fight knockout streak, right? You know, he's just been knocking everyone out ever since then. So he's probably the most. If there was an award for most improved fighter, he should get that award because it's kind of very mediocre coming into the UFC the first couple of fights, and he just goes on this knockout tear, just destroying everyone. And he's just on a roll right now, and he means business. You know, with all the massive favorites on the card, I'm surprised that Steve Garcia isn't a bigger favorite because yeah, he's been knocking out people that aren't high level, but the way he's performing has been very impressive. Coming up against an aging Calvin Kattar who does fight like he's aging, I feel that Steve should be able to get him out of there in this fight. You know, Calvin, he has a lot of fight years on him, and he's taken so much damage. He's on a 4 fight losing streak as well, which is, of course, to good competition because he's fighting at the top of the division. And Steve is pretty much knocking out nobodies. But styles make fights, and I feel that Calvin is going to press forward like he usually does, and that's pretty much all Steve needs in this fight in order to land the shots that'll put Calvin Kattar down. You know, Calvin Kattar is going to take even more damage in this fight because of the way he moves forward. And coming up against Steve Garcia, he's going to land those shots on you. He might even put Calvin Kattar out because Calvin has taken so much damage, and I'm actually curious about the age difference here because this, I believe, this is another one of these fights where it's a massive age difference. Oh, Steve Garcia is 33 and Calvin Kattar is 37. Steve Garcia is gonna be taller than him by 4 inches, and he'll have a 3 inch reach advantage. He's gonna be younger than him. Yeah, all everything is like pointing for Steve Garcia to win this fight. And yeah, Steve, he's just yeah, he's knocking out nobodies, but like I said, styles make fights, and Calvin Kattar just walks forward, takes damage, and that's all that Steve needs in order to land his shots. So I think Calvin, being the older fighter who does fight like an older fighter, Steve Garcia putting it all together. I see Calvin taking a ton of damage in this fight, and if it's not a first round knockout, which I wouldn't be surprised if it was. But if it's not a first round knockout, I can see Calvin Kattar crumbling down in the later rounds, you know, taking his fifth loss in a row. Because Steve has really just been putting it all together. And I can consider him being, as even though he's 33, I still consider Steve to be part of the new generation of fighters. And these new generation of fighters, they're taking over the old gen and they're pretty much wiping them out. And I see this fight being no different because Steve is aging and he's fighting like he's aging, and Steve Garcia is just on a massive tear right now. Of course, like this is a big step up in competition for Steve, but stylistically, it's a bad matchup for Calvin because Steve lands those shots on guys that walk forward, and Calvin Kattar walks forward. He's gonna be the smaller guy, the older guy, versus Steve Garcia. And I feel that's pretty much all Steve needs, you know? He's just on a knockout tear right now. He's aggressive. He's dangerous everywhere. And Kattar, just 4 losses in a row, has taken a ton of damage. And I'm just picking the younger, faster, more explosive guy, you know? I feel it should be a big statement for Steve Garcia to win this fight. and the way he's gonna win this fight is going to really push him up into top level contenders for his next fight. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm picking Steve Garcia. Next fight on the card, we have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Gabriel Bonfim. This is actually a really cool fight, but like I said many times on this fight card, a big age difference in these fighters. You know, I don't know why that's the theme for this fight card. It's kind of just old generation getting wiped out by the new generation, and I gotta pick Gabriel Bonfim to win this fight. You know, I really wanted to pick Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, but he's 42 years old right now, fighting a 27-year-old, which is just a crazy age difference, especially in fighting, right? But the thing is, I don't think Gabriel Bonfim is going to be able to knock out Wonderboy because that's kind of how Wonderboy has been losing. When he does lose really badly, he just gets knocked out. So I just think Gabriel Bonfim, he's not going to be one of these guys that knocks out Wonderboy. And if the fight remains standing, I can see Thompson winning these exchanges. I see Stephen Wonderboy Thompson winning the fight exchanges, standing up, but Gabriel Bonfim, he will want to take this fight to the ground. And I think he'll have some success doing that. You know, as bad as I want Thompson to win this fight, because I'm a huge Wonderboy fan, I just see Gabriel Bonfim being more dominant in there. He'll have the youth and strength advantage and the grappling advantage to be able to take him down. And if worse comes to worse for Gabriel Bonfim, you know, he can at least just press up against the fence to neutralize the striking of Thompson. And I think that's what's going to happen because once they're striking, Gabriel Bonfim is going to realize, okay, the striking isn't going my way. I'm going to have to take this guy down because I just think Wonderboy, he's a really good striker and he'll be able to outstrike someone like Gabriel Bonfim. Because just the way Steven Thompson strikes, kind of just bounces in and out, keeps it on the outside. I feel that'll work against someone who strikes like Gabriel, who isn't as clean, isn't as technical as Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. So closing the distance on Wonderboy, it's not going to be easy. But once Bonfim does get a hold of him, he'll be able to win that round. You know, he'll be able to remain dominant once he does get his hands around Wonderboy. And I think he will be able to because he's going to be a lot younger, a lot stronger, a lot heavier on the grappling than Wonderboy. So, worst case scenario for Gabriel Bonfim, he'll just press him up against the cage using his strength, using his youth, and winning control time like that, right? So, the way we seen Gabriel Bonfim lose was him getting outpaced, you know, swarmed with all kinds of pressure, you know, by Nicholas Dalby, who put an insane amount of pressure on him, an insane amount of a pace that he wasn't able to keep up with. And he just swarmed him with all those punches until he gassed he gassed out Gabriel Bonfim. And I don't think Wonderboy is gonna have that same game plan, you know. Wonderboy fights at a comfortable pace in a way, you know. He kind of takes his time, bounces in and out, kind of tags you from the outside. I don't think that's going to make Bonfim crumble the way Nicholas Dalby was fighting against Gabriel Bonfim. Wonderboy has a completely different style. He's not gonna just get hit and then keep coming forward, and then he just likes to stay patient, keep it on the outside, and that's kind of perfect for Gabriel Bonfim to be like, okay, let me just time an entry. Let me just maybe I'll eat a shot here and there, but it's not gonna like make me gas out and give up. That's kind of like perfect scenario for him. He's just once Wonderboy misses a kick, he'll just jump on him, get a hold of his body, drag him down and just push him up against the cage. So I think striking wise, Thompson is still very sharp, even at 42. He has really good distance control. But Bonfim, he's just a stronger, younger grappler who's going to be looking to clinch and grind you out. And I just think his youth and his strength and his grappling is going to give Gabriel Bonfim that edge in this fight. But striking wise, I feel Thompson will be having an edge here, but it's not enough to gas out or knock out Gabriel Bonfim. So this could be a ground and pound finish for Gabriel Bonfim once he does take him to the ground. You know, maybe even a submission. I don't know, but I don't think Gabriel's just going to accept being picked apart from the outside. You know, he wants to be closing that distance. I think eventually he will close that distance. And once he does close that distance, he will be able to win those rounds because he'll be in a more dominant position. He'll get himself in those dominant positions, right? So, yeah, pick is Gabriel Bonfim. But it'd be really cool to see Stephen Wonderboy Thompson get that fight. Next fight on the card, we have the main event, which is Derrick Lewis fighting Tallison Teixeira. My pick is Tallison Teixeira. This is probably the biggest age difference on the whole fight card, right? With all the massive age differences going on, we have Derrick Lewis, most knockouts out of anyone in the UFC history, turning 40 years old. Well, he is 40 years old, fighting a 25-year-old, 6'7" monster. And this 6'7" monster is undefeated, right? Finishing all of his fights in the first round. I have a feeling that this fight is going to be another Ilya Topuria versus Charles Oliveira type of fight. You know, out with the old, in with the new generation. Because why on earth would I pick an aging average fighter in Derrick Lewis? You know, yes, he has more knockouts than anyone in the UFC history, but this is just a bad matchup for him in every aspect of fighting. Because Teixeira is going to be a lot bigger than him, a lot longer than him, a lot more youthful than him, probably have the same amount of power as him. You know, when Derrick Lewis fights, he kind of relies on that big one shot knockout power. But we know he has really bad cardio issues. So we don't know how Tallison Teixeira looks in rounds 2 and 3. But we do know that Derrick is going to gas out as the fight goes on. Like, that's a fact. And if this fight makes it out of the first round, Tallison has all the tools he needs in order to beat him physically. He has all the tools he needs in order to beat him because we see Tallison Teixeira knocking everyone out, but he's actually a Brazilian jiu-jitsu champion. His ground game is just as good as his striking game. He has 7 knockouts and 1 submission, but not a lot of people know that this guy is very well rounded. He's not just knocking everyone out just to knock everyone out. He likes to strike, but we know he has tools to take care of himself if the fight goes on the ground, which probably it won't. I see Tallison getting a first round knockout here, but even if this fight goes past the first, second round, Tallison still will be the better fighter, right? This kid, Tallison, he's part of the new generation for sure, and these new generation of fighters, they're just wiping out the older generation, and this won't be any different, I don't think. But the thing is, power is the last thing to go with age. So all he really needs to do, Derrick Lewis, is land that one shot that'll put Tallison Teixeira out. But I just think Tallison, he's too smart for that. And if somehow the striking isn't going his way, he'll out grapple him. He'll take him down if he needs to. Get a ground and pound finish if he needs to. But I don't think that's gonna happen. I just think Tallison is too long, too strong, and I see him, handling Derrick Lewis early in the first round. So as long as Tallison doesn't get into a brawl and he's able to use his length like how he's supposed to, like how he usually does, he'll win this fight and he can easily get the job done. So considering Tallison is 25, 6'7", undefeated, finishing all of his fights in the first round, BJJ world champ, he has every reason to win this fight against 40-year-old Derrick Lewis. Knockout power only, fades really badly as the fight goes on, really bad cardio. My pick is uh Tallison Teixeira. This is just another one of these cases where new gen is wiping out the old gen. It's just going to be a pretty quick night in the office, I feel, for Tallison Teixeira. He's going to land that strike. And we've seen Derrick Lewis give up, when he's like, okay, this guy's clearly overpowering me. He's clearly wants it more than me. I'm gonna just take the L. I'm just gonna give up. I'm gonna give in. And that's probably what's gonna happen here. If Derrick Lewis doesn't go out really badly, he's gonna be like, all right, this guy is just completely picking me apart, and he'll probably just crumble. Ref steps in, he won't want to fight anymore. So yeah, I'm taking Tallison Teixeira. I just can't see Derrick Lewis landing that big knockout shot on him. That'd be crazy if he does, but Tallison actually wants this fight. He wants this win. He wants to make a run. He's motivated, and Derrick, he's kind of just there for the paycheck. He doesn't have championship aspirations in mind anymore. Which, yeah, coming up against a young, hungry, and motivated guy like Tallison should run through this guy in Derrick Lewis. But I think it'll be a fun and explosive fight, so I'm looking forward to it. But that was the main event, and that's a wrap. I just broke down every fight, every pick, laid it all out. And if you like the breakdowns, let me know what you thought of it. So let me know if you agree or disagree with any of them in the comments. Let me know your picks, and let's see where we agree and don't agree. But yeah, I appreciate all the support as always, and catch you guys next time with more predictions and my reactions to the fight. So good luck and goodbye.